I want to cover the things that the survival shows don't tell you. Hey guys, Ryan Gill here with Hunt Primitive, and today we're going to do something a little bit different than what we normally do. It's almost a throwback to some of my earliest videos in doing friction fire, but I wanted to do a video on mastering friction fire and truly what that means. So I know there's many people that say, well, you'd never truly master friction fire, but you can master learning every single thing that you can do to stack the odds in your favor, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video right now. So a few really important things to consider. We're talking about off the landscape friction fire, and in this video I'm going to be doing the hand drill, and this is really easy stuff that we can source off the landscape. Now this is stuff that I've already pre-sourced, so somebody would say, well, that's not off the landscape because you didn't show us going and gathering that. Well, it's completely wild stuff, nothing store-bought. It's a spindle made out of dog fennel, and it's a hearth that's quite literally out of a broken cedar branch, and I've used it quite a bit, and it's all sapwood cedar, no heartwood at all. The heartwood carries a lot of the resin, which is going to cause a lot of that squeaking, which this probably squeak a little bit too, but it doesn't allow for making a good ember because it almost lubricates as the resin in heartwood heats up. It starts to lubricate the spindle, and then therefore you're not creating the friction that you need to create the coal. But the sapwood is a good option. Now there's plenty of everybody's got their own favorites, so that's not the important part. I want to cover the things that the survival shows don't tell you. It's all the little things that I've picked up after, probably somewhere between 15 and 20 years of me doing friction fires, that I have a lot of confidence whenever I go out that I can collect things to make a friction fire and get a coal the first time, almost every single time. Obviously within reasonable conditions. Can't go out in a snowstorm and do it every time, and I can't go out in a rainstorm every time and do it, or if it just got done with a 3-day monsoon. That stuff's almost impossible to do realistically, especially with hand drill. Very, very difficult, but there are things that you can do whether you're in a survival situation or a primitive living situation, and we are going to deep dive into all the little things to prep to give you the best chance of getting a coal the first time, every single time. So that's why we call it the mastering of friction fire. A friction fire set, once it's obtained, is very, very important. It's not something that's, once you have a nice set that works well together, it's not easily discarded. It is easily discarded. You can take it and you can throw it in the fire and you can burn it up, but it's such a valuable resource that you save this and you protect it and you take care of it, and you also do things to make your next friction fire that much easier. Now, if we say we are just in a fresh survival situation and we have nothing, then we get the idea that, okay, we need to go make friction fire. Let's go find the first trashy stuff that we can find, and we're going to struggle and struggle and struggle until we get a coal. And that is exactly what we want to avoid in this situation, as well as a real survival situation. Rushing into something is going to lead to failure almost every single time. So instead of saying I need to build fire and then you going on a quest looking specifically just for fire making things, look for all the things that you could use in a survival situation. Cover ground, look for your best spot for your shelter, but all the while passively start looking for things that you can use to make friction fire. Now when you're talking about making friction fire, some of the best things that you're going to find to use are going to be stuff like flower stalks. So if it gets a flower stalk like a dog fennel, a yucca, a mullein, those are your best spindles. And sometimes you just simply can't find that stuff, but you can increase your opportunities by checking, like say along field edges or along creek edges, anywhere that there's a lot of sunlight where you're going to start getting those flowers that pop up. And those are going to give you the best spindles possible, whether it's for hand drill or bow drill. And if you have absolutely none of those in the area, then you need to be keeping your eye out for the trees that are going to make the best spindles. Back when I was really new at this, I used to think that mastering friction fire meant that you could go out into the woods, take 2 sticks, rub them together, and make fire every single time, just like randomly picking up. I could make fire out of anything, and that's not the case at all. That's the romantic way of thinking about mastering friction fire. The realistic way of mastering it is preparation. It's knowing what to look for and not settling for anything less. And so you walk around passively, and as soon as you find something, unless it is the fluke, that it is the absolute perfect spindle, the best spindle you've ever seen in your life, then pick it up and bring it with you. But as you continue to just wander around, always look for something better. And your spindle is typically going to be your most important piece of the set. So the hearth, we're obviously going to look for those too, and we're going to be very picky about those. But a lot of times on your dead trees, or even trees that just simply have dead branches, say like a cedar or a basswood, something relatively soft, we can break the dead branches off, test them out, and see, is it too punky, is it still too green, is it just about right? And we don't want to try to chop into this big log to get a hearth out of. You want to take these little dried sticks that come off the edge of trees that are already dead, and especially ones that are in the sun. So be very particular about the things that you choose to make your friction fire out of. That's the first biggest tip that I can possibly give you. Next, once you have a set that you are really, really confident in, it's a nice straight spindle, and you got a hearth board that's definitely very, very dry, and you're very confident that it's going to work. Now, instead of rushing into it, now if you're fighting against the clock and you don't have a choice, then you don't have a choice. But that's why I say, don't wait till, I'm in a survival situation, so I'm going to spend all day hyper-focusing on looking for water and shelter and all that kind of stuff, because fire comes later, and then I'll worry about fire. As you're walking around, you're looking at all the resources, and you've collected this stuff. Now, once you find a location you're going to be, the best thing that you could possibly do is find the driest location possible. We're not going to be in a rush to turn this into a set to make a fire. Rushing into anything is the best way to be defeated. So what we're going to do is we're going to find, hopefully, the place that the sun is shining, on a rock, on sand, on a log. The worst place ever is anywhere that's green. If you've got grass, if the ground is wet because it has been raining, laying it on dirt, anything that this set can soak up moisture is going to stunt your ability to get a coal with this. We want this as dry as it can possibly be, and oftentimes that means elevating it off the ground. Even if you get forked sticks and you stick them in the ground and you elevate this stuff above the green grass and foliage around you. But the best places, obviously, are going to be places like hot sand, or dusty kind of dirt that's just been super hyper dried. There's no moisture in it whatsoever, or even on a rock. And bake it in the sun as much as you can, as long as you can. And when the sun moves off, you move the set and you keep finding a new spot, because the longer that this is subjected to a lot of UV, it's going to dry it out a lot. So we don't want to be in a rush to make the fire unless we absolutely have to be. Now, once it is about time to make the fire, preparation is of course key. You don't actually need a lot of tinder. So here I've got just a teeny tiny little nest out of cabbage palm that I picked up here, and then I've got a couple little dried flower kind of stalks, and I'll use those as soon as I get a little bit of a flame. I'll use those to put right over it and catch this, and then we can drop the bigger sticks up on top of it. But we're going to do the same exact stuff with this as we did with our hearth and spindle, and we're going to lay them in the sun, and we're going to hyper dry them as much as we possibly can. Best case scenario is you have a sunny day and lots of sunshine, lots of sand, lots of rocks. You'll get a friction fire every single time. Now, as if it's misty, rainy, you just got to do the best you absolutely can with it, but you're just kind of in a I'm screwed situation, quite honestly. So then once you have all this stuff gathered up, it's really important to keep it dry. So you work really hard to dry it. Don't go lay it in the shade, in the dirt, because remember, everything likes to normalize with the natural humidity. So we're talking, I live in Florida, so we're talking summertime. Right now it's June. and we're looking at 80 to 90% humidity every single day. It's ridiculously humid here, and you have to take care of this stuff, and you cannot just leave it in the shade or on the ground, in the grass, in the dirt, because this stuff will soak up moisture like crazy and fight you. So you have to bake this stuff in the sun. Now, it's actually getting a little bit late to be doing a friction fire, in my opinion. Now, it's still very doable, but as of right now, this stuff is absorbing ambient humidity. Our best time to have tried the friction fire was when the sun was up, but that's also when filming light isn't very good. It's all spotty and crappy, and it's also really hot, and I'm trying to avoid all that. But the sun just is starting to go down behind the trees, so keep that in mind too. Now we're talking about weather conditions during the day, that there are better times during today to make a fire, and that would be while it's the driest, while the sun is the hottest, while the humidity is potentially the lowest. And always get out from underneath the trees. So like if you're in a situation, I've done this many times, going to different shows or camping or who knows what all, is trying to make fires while you're underneath a canopy of a tree. It's so much more humid there. Always go to where the sun is and where the ground is the driest. And if you can't find a place where the ground is really dry, bring something with you, like a dry piece of, heartwood pine or a rock or something that you can use as a platform. Because if you set all of this stuff down on the ground in, say, the grass or wet dirt, and you start trying to make a coal, even if you get the coal, the ground is going to just push moisture right into that coal, and it's going to put it out pretty much every single time. So when you set up this platform to do your fire, it needs to be the driest it can possibly be, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Can you make one on the grass, on the wet ground, and put a leaf under it and catch it? You absolutely can, but we're talking about doing the best we can the first time every single time. So you have to make sure that your stuff is as dry as it can possibly be. Bake it in the sun. And then the platform that you're going to use, make sure that that's in the sun. Use a rock. Best case scenario is you got some great big rock shelf that's blazing hot. That's why if you watch any of the survival shows and stuff like that they used to show years ago when people were doing their audition tapes, they would show, oh, I'm in the driveway and I'm making a friction fire. Well, nowadays, if you have those people from the survival shows call you, they aren't looking for people that can make a friction fire in their driveway, because everybody can do that. You know why? Because that's a very, very dry surface, and it's very, very common. So, I mean, shoot, anybody can go out with, a nice little set, and they can twist up a coal super fast in their driveway, because that's a hyper dry surface. Well, that you need to be able to replicate that in the wild. So that's like a little key trick for anybody that wants to be on survival shows in the future. Don't do one in your driveway in your audition tape. Go out somewhere else and do it, and show that you know where to make a friction fire. Little tip for you there. So once we have this all put together, now I'm just running with a stone knife, and I'm going to cut a new notch. And this is all stuff that you've seen before, so there's no sense in me beating a dead horse. This is the advanced portion of friction fire. If you don't know how to cut a notch or burn in your spindle, then this is kind of above your head a little bit anyway. So I'm not going to cover the basics of it. I have videos that cover the basic that are like 10 years old. But give me one more second here and I'll have this thing cut in with this stone knife. And then we are going to work on making a friction fire. And I'm going to bring the camera in close, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, and some other things that you can do to increase your chances of having a successful coal. Alright, there we go. That's all the longer it took for me to cut in a new spot to burn in, with a stone knife nonetheless. Alright, again, so this is specifically a bad place to make a fire. Now, if you're going to make a full fire, you want to make sure you gather up all your little sticks and all that stuff. I'm not worried about that. If you can't turn, your tinder bundle flame into a fire, then you got more problems than just trying to create coal. But anyway, when you finally get to this situation where you have all your stuff lined out, it's been drying in the sun for quite a long time, and you're ready to finally make like this. We don't want to set this on the ground. I just did that. We don't want to do that because it's going to soak up moisture. This is nice and dry. It's been baking in the sun. It's really fluffy. Let's set it over here to the side and take care of that a little bit better than I just did. So once you have all this stuff together, we need to burn this in. Now the first thing that people want to do is they want to start getting it burned in. You can tell how dry that is already just from baking in the sun. It's burned in, it's good. Now be patient and don't rush through this. Now usually your burn-in is going to take a little bit longer than that, because unless it is super dry. But if you have to take 2 or 3 minutes to really get that burned in, don't run straight in to making your coal, because if you do that, you've already exerted energy. So we want to put all of our energy possible into the first time, the first opportunity making this coal. We want to get it right the very first time. So catch your breath, make sure you're well rested, and then we can go into making this fire. All right, now we've got a really dry leaf, again, one that's been laying in the sun. And again, more important things to remember, don't ever pick up a green leaf because it's got moisture in it. You need to avoid at all costs drawing moisture from the ground into your coal. Okay, so I brought just a little rock along because I am doing it on grass, and I want to show you that you can do that. So always get all your stuff set up, make sure your angles, and like this rock wants to contour the best that it can. And then I'm not going to talk during the process, but you need to be comfortable, because when it's time to get down to business, that's what we're going to do. So make sure you have your breath. You're going to put everything into one shot, and you're going to go longer than you think you need. Even when you think you have a coal, you go until you physically cannot anymore, because the bigger pile of burnt wood that can catch, the bigger and more sustainable your coal is going to end up being. So now I'm not pushing hard, like I'm pushing down hard, but I'm not trying to go super fast. Steady. I actually think we already have a coal, quite honestly. That's it. We let this thing sit in the sun all day. I don't know how long that was, but it was not very long. Now, there's no rush. I need you to really understand that. I'm going to shelter it from too much wind, but there's no rush. Catch your breath, get your stuff ready. There's no rush on this coal. It's not going anywhere. This coal could burn for a couple minutes. So now, very, very gently wrap it in your tinder. And what I like to do personally, instead of rushing it, I'll blow into it a little bit. I want to give it a little bit of air. But what I'm really trying to do is work this, especially because this isn't really super fine tinder. So I want it to heat up. I want it to get hot. the more you blow it, you're actually using fuel. So even with a really small tinder bundle, you could burn this tinder bundle out, but I can feel that it's getting really warm on my fingers, and that's what you want. You want to get to a point where you can't touch it because everything around it is getting super hot. So just keep heating it up. Because this is a coarse tinder bundle, if I just sat here and blew it, and it's small, I could run out of fuel. And I specifically wanted to use the small one because I wanted to show you that it's very doable. Hope it's getting hot now. There it is. And then these things, of course, and then when you build your fire, don't build it right on the grass or where it's super humid. Put it up on something so you can establish your fire without, here my pants are on fire, so you can establish this fire without the ground driving a whole bunch of moisture up into it. So you can see we didn't exert a lot of energy. I didn't tear my hands up. We made the most preparation we could possibly make. We set this set in the sun and we got the fire going, and super easy peasy. If I had a bunch of sticks here, we'd have a great big bonfire, but it's like 95 degrees here in Florida. I don't need a great big fire to show you what I want to show you. So that being said, now say this fire was continuing to go, the chore's not done yet. So again, this is a super valuable set. So what I want you to realize is if something happens to the set, you can kind of be in trouble. So what you do is you start looking for a secondary set. And you always have this one for when you need it. Now, this is where the long-term survival theory really comes into play. So then once you have your set and you know that it works really, really well, then we're going to take a lot of care with this. We're going to use this as much as we possibly can. You can see how many fires I've gotten out of this, a ton. And the one that we just did right here, I easily have another fire in it. And several of these I have extra fires if I need them. Once you establish the set, you save the set because you know it works. So survival situation, you're not going to just like throw this in the fire. And it was funny because the very first friction fire I think I ever got, many, many years ago, I got it. And then I was like, cool, I got the fire. And then I picked up my stuff and I threw it in the fire and I burned it up because I was like, I don't need it anymore. I got a fire with it. And it's like, that was the dumbest thing ever. I put so much work into getting that set. Why on earth would I just discard it and not care? You're not going to source stuff every time you want to make a fire. Use the same dang set. So not only are we going to preserve this set and we're going to save it, but we're going to go gather more materials to potentially make another set. But instead of just going completely raw into it, now that say we have a fire, huge, huge, huge piece of importance here that I cannot emphasize this enough is, especially if you don't have sunny days or opportunities to hyper dry your spindle and your hearth in the sun, when you have a fire going, your kit goes next to the fire, not in the fire where it's going to burn or even scorch, but within say a foot or 2 foot of the fire where it's safely out of the way. This stuff should be set there so it is constantly being as dry as it possibly can. We want this as dry as possible. And you can see the benefits of doing that for how fast I just got that fire, and this set has just been taken care of. It's not that it's anything special, it's just been taken care of. So it's been hyper dried by fire and then in the sunlight today. So, and if you have a fire going and you set this stuff by it, it's just going to continue to dry it and then keep it as dry. The drier it is, the faster you're going to get a coal. So you can tell this stuff is super dry. Now when you get your other set, your second set, your backup set, you're going to, instead of just trying to make a fire out of it, you're going to hyper dry it too by the fire on the other side. So now you've got your fire. Once it's hyper dried, now what you need to do is take one set and you put it in one area. Maybe you travel with it, maybe you don't. The other one's in a safe place. Now you have 2 sets in case something happens. Maybe you get caught in a downpour, one of your sets is now soaked, or one set just doesn't want to work that day for whatever reason. But always always, always have one set trying to be as dry as it possibly can, be it in the sun, be it by the fire. Think long term with this stuff. So I'm hoping that those tips and tricks to mastering friction fire will really help you out, either in your bushcraft and survival communities or in the wild should you ever actually be stranded and need to survive with friction fire. Preparation is key. You want to get the coal the first time, every time. And I do want to touch on this right before we close out of here, is unfortunately when you watch a lot of the survival shows, especially years past, you would see where they would be working so hard to get a coal, and there was never any rest time. They're going they're just going hard. It's not working. Their hands are falling apart because they've worked so hard to try to get it, and their stuff keeps breaking. It's because it wasn't prepared properly. It's very easy to get in that mindset of, I have the stuff here and I really need fire, so I need to freak out and get that fire, and then when it doesn't work the first time, like 30 seconds later, you're trying it again and you're trying it again. And if you would just walk away from it, set the stuff in the sun, hyper dry it as much as you possibly can. And if you don't have sun, if you have breeze, you put it up somewhere where the breeze can hit it. But you need to find the places that are going to be the driest possible. And that's how you're going to stand the best chance at getting a coal, I promise you, every time. Now, and then you've also seen, I guarantee you've seen where they finally get a coal, and as soon as they get a coal, get it in something, and then we lost the coal, because you blew it apart. It was this big. It was that you have to let it grow. You can let it grow for 2 or 3. I think I did a test one time, and I had something like, it was like a ridiculous amount of time, like almost 15 minutes that I had a coal that just sat there. And I never touched it, I never did anything. It was a relatively calm day, and it just sat there for 15 minutes before it finally burned out to where it was no longer usable. So there's no rush. Let that coal build. The bigger the coal is, the better chance of blowing it into fire you're going to have. Same thing when you get it in your tinder bundle. When you get it in there, be patient. Do your prep work the best that you can, and constantly think on ways that you can keep your sets dry, and then hyper dry them by the fire. Hyper dry them in the sun. Hyper dry your set, and you'll have fires in minutes every single time. Thanks for following along. Hope this helps you out in your friction fire adventures, and we'll catch you on the next adventure.